There are people in this world who treat an apology like it costs them something vital, like the syllables themselves are carved from bone, and to offer them would leave a permanent gap where dignity used to live. Sergio Lawrence was that kind of person. I knew it the first week I met him, back when we were still strangers, sharing a too small office on the fourth floor of an architecture firm that smelled permanently of coffee and blueprint paper. He had knocked a stack of my files off the shared counter without looking back, just walked through the consequence of his carelessness like a man parting tall grass. I stood there watching the papers fan across the floor, waiting. He did not turn around. He did not say a word. He simply pulled out his chair, sat down, and opened his laptop. I picked up my files. My name is Kenny Carter. I am, by nature, someone who believes that words cost nothing and mean everything. I say sorry when I bump into a chair. I say thank you to the automated voice on the phone before I catch myself. My mother used to say I was born apologizing for taking up space, which was not entirely untrue. So Sergio Lawrence, with his proud jaw and his iron silence, was to me the most bewildering kind of person. The kind who lived inside himself so completely that the world outside barely registered as real. I should have disliked him. Most people with any sense did, at least at first. He was not rude in the theatrical way that makes a person memorable. He was rude in the quiet way, the way that makes you question whether you imagined it, whether you were being too sensitive, whether the slight was ever truly a slight at all. He would cut across conversations with a correction delivered so flatly it took you a full 3 seconds to realize you had been dismissed. He would walk into a room, assess it with those dark eyes, and walk out again without acknowledging anyone, as though the gathering of people had simply failed to meet some private standard. And yet, and yet there was something about the way he worked, the way he bent over a drafting table at 11 at night when everyone else had gone home, his sleeves rolled to the elbows, his brow creased in total absorption. The way he would crumple a design he'd spent 16 hours on because it wasn't right, not according to anyone else's judgment, but according to his own. There was a kind of honesty in that, a ruthlessness toward himself that he wore so naturally it looked like peace. I started staying late too, not because I had to, not even because I particularly wanted to, at first, but there was something about the quality of the quiet when it was just the two of us and the hum of the building's ventilation and the soft sound of pencil on paper. Something that felt, strangely, like safety. He noticed me before he acknowledged me. I felt it before I understood it. The way his eyes would track across the room and land somewhere near my shoulder. The way a conversation between me and a colleague would cause him to go very still at his desk. Sergio Lawrence noticed everything. He simply said nothing about any of it. The first time he spoke to me directly, genuinely directly, not as a correction or a logistical necessity, was a wet evening in late autumn. I had missed the last bus, discovered my umbrella was broken in 3 places, and was standing under the narrow awning outside the building, watching the rain with the specific resigned despair of someone who has accepted that the universe is occasionally petty. His car pulled up. The window came down. He looked at me for a long moment. "Where do you live?" I told him. He unlocked the door. We drove the entire 20 minutes in near silence. The rain hit the windshield in waves. At a red light, he said, without preamble and without looking at me, "You take the bus even on cold nights." It was not a question. "My car is in the shop," I said. "Since when?" He said nothing more until he pulled up outside my building. I thanked him. He nodded. I was halfway out the door when he spoke again, quiet enough that I almost missed it under the rain. "It should not take 3 weeks to repair a car." I looked back at him. The light from the street caught the side of his face. He was staring straight ahead, jaw set, as though he had not said anything personal at all, as though it was simply a fact he was reporting. I got out of the car. He drove away. I stood on the wet pavement for a moment longer than necessary, holding my broken umbrella, feeling something I could not yet name settle somewhere in the center of my chest. That was the beginning, not of a love story exactly, at least not the kind that announces itself with fanfare. It was more like a slow geological shift, the kind you don't notice until the landscape looks completely different and you can no longer find the person you used to be standing in it. Over the months that followed, I became something of a scholar in the subject of Sergio Lawrence. Not because I set out to be, not with any conscious intent, but because he was the kind of person who rewarded close attention. He communicated in a register that required you to turn the volume up inside yourself just to hear it. He began bringing 2 coffees to the office in the mornings. He never said one was for me. He simply set it on the corner of the shared counter, nearest my desk. It was always the right order. Oat milk, no sugar, the particular brand from the cart 2 streets over that was better than anything the in-building machine could produce. The first time I pointed at it and looked at him, he shrugged one shoulder, as though I had asked him about the weather. "The cart is on my route," he said. The second time I thanked him, the corner of his mouth moved, just fractionally, not quite a smile, but in the vicinity of one. I learned that his silences had textures. There was the silence that meant he was thinking and should not be interrupted. There was the silence that meant he disagreed, but had decided the point was beneath engagement. There was the silence that meant he was uncomfortable and was hoping the moment would pass. And then there was a fourth silence, rarer, softer, with a quality of attention to it, that I only identified much later as the silence that meant he was content. That particular silence he gave most freely when it was just the two of us. He did not talk about his past. I gathered pieces incidentally, the way you gather stones from a path, without trying. A father who had high expectations and a narrow definition of acceptable outcomes. A childhood spent achieving things that failed to satisfy either the achiever or the audience. A deep structural belief, laid down early and reinforced often, that expressing need was a form of weakness, and that weakness was a form of failure, and that failure was something to be corrected in private rather than acknowledged in public. He had learned, somewhere along the way, that an apology was an admission of fault, and an admission of fault was an invitation for someone to think less of you. So he had simply stopped apologizing. He would fix his mistakes quietly, efficiently, without comment. He would redirect rather than acknowledge. He would move forward and trust that forward motion itself was a kind of answer. It took me a long time to understand this. In the beginning, the absence of apology felt like arrogance. Later, I understood it was armor. The distinction matters. It changes everything about how you respond to a person. Arrogance deserves confrontation. Armor deserves patience. I would be lying if I said I was always patient. Our first real argument happened on a project deadline that had us both fraying. I had restructured a section of the presentation we were co-presenting, streamlining something he had made needlessly complex. And when he arrived to find the change made without consultation, he went very quiet in a way I had not yet learned to read correctly. I thought it was the thoughtful silence. It was the displaced anger one. "You changed it without asking me." "I improved it," I said, which in retrospect was exactly the wrong thing to say, even if it was true. "That is not the point." "Then what is the point?" He turned and looked at me fully, which he rarely did when he was feeling something, and the look had so many layers that I catalogued them all later, in the quiet of my apartment. There was irritation on top. Underneath it, something that looked surprisingly like hurt. Underneath that, something I could not yet name. "The point," he said, very precisely, "is that we are partners on this project. Partners consult each other." "You're right," I said immediately. "I should have told you first. I'm sorry." The apology landed between us like a stone into still water. I watched the rings spread across his expression. He had not expected it. He stood there for a moment, this tall, controlled man who moved through the world as though he had anticipated every outcome, and he was visibly caught off guard by 2 words. "Fine," he said eventually, and sat back down, but I noticed that he kept the restructured version. After that, something between us shifted with more intention. The coffee on the counter continued. He began asking my opinion on things, not as deference, I understood, but as a genuine desire to hear another perspective he trusted. He drove me home on more rainy nights than could be attributed to coincidence. He found reasons to work near my desk when he had a perfectly good desk of his own. The night he kissed me, we had been working very late, and the building was fully empty, and there was a large moon over the city, throwing silver light through the tall windows. I had been leaning over his shoulder to look at something on his screen, and when I straightened up, he was already looking at me. Just looking, with that fourth silence, the content one, wrapped around us like a room we had built together without discussing the blueprints. He lifted one hand and pushed my hair back from my forehead, slowly, deliberately, the way he did everything. "Kenny," he said. "Just my name." That was all, and then he kissed me. It was not a cautious kiss. Whatever Sergio Lawrence held back in words, he did not hold back in that. I felt the full weight of everything he hadn't said in the months prior. Every morning coffee, every silent drive, every fraction of a smile, and it was staggering. I had to put a hand on the desk to keep my balance. His eyes were open, watching my face with careful attention. "Okay," I said, because it was all I could manage. The corner of his mouth moved. This time, all the way. We were not a simple couple. I want to be fair about this, about both of us, about the ways we made it harder and the ways we made it work. Love, I have found, is never the problem. Love is actually the easy part in the end. What is hard is the daily practice of letting another person know what is happening inside you. What is hard is choosing over and over again to be visible. Sergio was a private man, in love with someone constitutionally unable to have unexpressed feelings. I was an open person, in love with someone who kept his interior life behind glass. We spent the first year of our relationship learning each other's native languages and failing often and spectacularly. I would tell him too much too soon and watch him retreat behind that carefully composed expression. He would say nothing when I needed to hear something, and I would fill the silence with interpretations that were usually wrong. But we tried. That is the thing I want you to understand. He tried in ways that did not look like trying from the outside. He would reach across a restaurant table and put his hand over mine when I was in the middle of talking about something that upset me, not to stop me talking, but to signal he was there. He learned slowly and at some visible cost to his habits to say things like, I was thinking about what you said, and I noticed you seemed quieter today. Small things, enormous things. The architecture of intimacy is made of exactly those moments. I tried too. I learned to read his signals. I learned that when he went silent after I asked him something personal, the silence was not dismissal, it was processing. I learned to wait. I learned that his acts of service, the fixed things, the solved problems, the extra coffee, the umbrella he left in my bag one morning without comment, and which I only found during a rainstorm, or a whole vocabulary of care that he delivered fluently, even when the spoken version came haltingly. We moved in together at the start of our second year. His apartment, which had been rigidly organized and completely impersonal, began acquiring evidence of me in layers. A blanket on the couch, books stacked in a different order, the faint smell of the candles I liked. He never commented on any of it. He simply made room. Our dynamic as alpha and omega added its own texture to everything. Sergio wore the alpha designation the way he wore everything, without apology, without performance, but with a certain quiet gravity. His protective instincts were as real and as strong as anything in him, and they showed themselves in the same indirect way as everything else. He would position himself between me and doors without appearing to notice he was doing it. He would track me in a room without being obvious about it. When I was not feeling well, something in him went alert and focused, and he would manage the entire situation medication, blankets, fluids, quiet, with such competent tenderness that I sometimes pretended to be sicker than I was just to experience it a little longer, which was terrible of me, and I am not ashamed. He never said I love you easily. He said it the first time on a night when I had cried over something that, in retrospect, did not merit the magnitude of the crying. A bad day, compounded by a stupid mistake at work, and exhaustion, and the specific cruelty of running out of the one tea I kept for emergencies. I was sitting on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, which is where I go when the crying is serious, and he came and sat on the floor next to me without being invited, which was unprecedented and therefore its own kind of earthquake. He did not try to fix it. He just sat there, his shoulder against mine, until the storm passed. Then, into the quiet, without any particular ceremony, I love you, Kenny. I started crying again immediately, which was not the reaction he was expecting. He looked alarmed. I had to explain, through inadequate breath, that this was good crying. He did not fully understand the distinction, but accepted it with the trust he had been cautiously extending. I love you too, I told him. Obviously, spectacularly, for a very long time. Yes, he said, with the tranquil certainty of a man confirming something he has known for a while. I married him on a clear morning in spring. He wore a charcoal suit and stood at the front of the room with his hands clasped and his face in its default composed arrangement until I came through the door. And then, just for a moment, just briefly, everything in him opened. The composed face cracked like light through a curtain. Something pure and unguarded moved across his features. It was so fast that most people probably missed it. I did not miss it. I was looking for it. I had been looking for it since the night he drove me home in the rain. I found out on a gray morning, 6 weeks after we came back from our honeymoon, in the bathroom of our apartment, while Sergio was at the office and the building was quiet around me. 2 lines. I sat on the edge of the bathtub for a very long time. In our world, in the world of alphas and omegas, this was not an impossibility. It was, in fact, a known possibility that we had discussed in the theoretical sense of a couple who was newly married and still feeling out the shape of the future. We had talked about it the way people talk about things they want but haven't yet committed to a timeline for, warmly, tentatively, with the particular soft ambiguity of not yet. And here was the not yet sitting in the palm of my hand. I was not afraid, exactly. Or rather, I was afraid, but it was the kind that shares a heartbeat with excitement, that is only distinguishable by which way you are leaning into it. I leaned toward it, standing there in the bathroom, holding the test, looking at my own reflection in the mirror over the sink. I felt the fear, and underneath it a warmth so profound and settled that it could only be one thing. I wanted this. I wanted this with a certainty so clear it was almost physical. I wanted to see Sergio Lawrence hold a child we had made together. I wanted to watch that composed face open the way it had only ever opened for me. I wanted the life that this small test was pointing toward. What I did not anticipate was the conversation that followed. I should have chosen a better moment. I understand that now. I had been turning the news over for 3 days, practicing how to tell him, planning the right setting and the right words, and then I threw all of it out the window on a Thursday evening when he came home tired, and I was so full of it that I could not keep it inside any longer. He was still in his jacket. He had set his bag down and was reading something on his phone, and I said, from across the kitchen, "Sergio, I need to tell you something." He looked up. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was unlike any silence I had cataloged before. It had no texture I recognized. His face went through something very fast, surprise, and then something else that moved too quickly for me to catch. And then it went entirely still. "Are you certain?" His voice was calm, level, professional. "Yes." He nodded, slowly, set his phone down on the counter, looked somewhere past my shoulder. "All right," he said. "All right. Not wonderful, not incredible, not the soft opening I had hoped for, not even a question about how I was feeling. Just all right, delivered in the tone a person uses when they are told an appointment has been rescheduled." And then he picked up his phone again and said he needed to make a call, and he went to his study, and the door did not close loudly, but it closed firmly, and I stood in the kitchen holding onto the counter and trying to decide what I had just witnessed. I told myself it was shock. I told myself he needed time. I told myself this was Sergio, who processed everything internally first and came out the other side. I told myself to be patient. I was patient. For 2 weeks, I was patient. And in those 2 weeks, Sergio Lawrence, the man who showed love in acts and distances and silences, became a man who was simply absent. Present in the apartment, yes. Sharing the bed, yes. Sitting across from me at dinner, yes. But not there, not truly. Something in him had withdrawn behind a wall I could not locate and therefore could not address. He worked later. He came to bed after I was asleep. When I reached for him in the morning, he did not pull away, but he did not come toward me either. He floated in the same space as me and kept his own gravity, and I could feel the distance growing between us like water filling a room, slow and certain. I tried to talk to him, multiple times, gently at first, then less gently. "Sergio, I need you to talk to me about this." "There is nothing to discuss," he said. "The pregnancy is a fact. We will manage it. We will manage it as though our child was a project deliverable, as though my body and my fear and my bone-deep need for him to be in this with me was a problem to be administered." "That is not what I need from you right now," I said, and my voice had an edge I did not try to smooth. "What do you need?" "I need you to be here. Actually here, not just in the room." He looked at me in that way he had, the careful, layered look, and for a moment I thought he was going to say something real, something from the actual interior of himself, but he said, "I am here," in a voice so flat it was almost cruel, and went back to what he was doing. I stopped asking after that, not from lack of caring, from exhaustion. There is a particular tiredness that comes from reaching for someone who keeps stepping just outside your reach. It is not about love. The love was there, unchanged, unreduced. But love cannot survive entirely on its own. Love requires tending. It requires the daily choice to show up and be known. And Sergio, for reasons I could not yet reach, had stopped making that choice. The worst night was a Saturday in the middle of that cold stretch, when I woke at 3 in the morning, not feeling well. The early stages of pregnancy had been kind to me in some ways and unkind in others, and this particular 3 in the morning was an unkind one. I sat in the bathroom on the cool tile floor, head against the wall, and I cried. Not performance crying, not the cathartic kind that eventually resolves into something clean. The quiet, tired, nothing left kind. The kind that happens when you are scared and unwell, and you reach to your left for the person who is supposed to be your person, and he is not there. He was asleep 10 feet away, and he was not there. I went back to bed eventually. I slid under the covers next to the long, warm weight of him, and I looked at the ceiling, and I thought, I cannot do this alone. I am going to have to find a way to make him understand that he cannot do this to me. That whatever is going on inside him, whatever fear or resistance or grief is driving this withdrawal, he does not get to disappear into it and leave me stranded. I made the decision that morning, in the dark, before the light came. I was going to give him one more chance to come to me on his own. If he didn't, I was going to leave. I gave him a week. He did not come. On the Friday of that week, I packed a bag. I did it carefully, deliberately, with the specific composed calm of someone who has already done the crying. I folded things. I made choices about what I needed. I moved through the apartment we had built together. The blanket on the couch, the books rearranged, the candles, and I did not let myself feel any of it yet, because if I started feeling it, I would not be able to finish packing. He came home at 8. I was sitting on the couch with the bag beside me. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at the bag, he looked at me. Something moved through his face, fast and complex and completely unguarded, which was so rare that even in that moment, I registered it, filed it away. Kenny, I'm going to stay with a friend for a few days, I said. I need you to understand that I am not leaving because I want to. I'm leaving because staying is hurting me, and I am pregnant, and I cannot afford to be hurt right now. I need. My voice caught and I steadied it. I need to feel like I am not alone in this, and for the last month, I have felt alone. Every single day. He set his bag down, very slowly. He stood very still. I have not, he started. You have, I said gently but without room for argument. You have been gone. You are standing in this room right now, and you are gone. And I don't know why, and I have tried to ask, and you won't let me in. So I need to give us some space, so that I can stop hurting from trying to reach you, and you can figure out whatever it is you're trying to figure out. And then if you want to talk, really talk, Sergio, actually in words, like someone who is my partner, then I want that. I want that more than almost anything, but I can't keep doing this. The silence that fell was the most textured I had ever heard from him. It had weight in it. It had something that was almost sound, a frequency just below hearing. I watched his face and I watched him trying to hold it still, and failing. And the failing was the most honest thing I had seen from him in weeks. Don't go, he said. 2 words, quiet, with no scaffold around them. Give me a reason to stay, I said. Tell me something real. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He pressed his lids together and looked at the floor, and I could see it. I could see the war happening inside him, the old armor clanging against the new person he had been building himself into, and I wanted so much to go to him, to close the distance for him. But I had been closing distances for weeks, and I was tired, and I could not do it again, not this time. This one he had to cross. He looked up. I am afraid, he said. I did not move. I am afraid of. He stopped, started again. My father, the way he was, I have spent a significant portion of my life ensuring that I am not him, that the things he did, the coldness, the distance, the way he made everyone around him feel like they were failing a standard no one had been shown, that none of that is in me. He said it carefully, like a man handling something very fragile and very sharp. When you told me you were pregnant, I heard the thing I have always feared most, that now there would be a child, and a child would need something from me that I do not know if I can give. Something warm, something patient, something that does not. His voice broke on the last word and he stopped. I stood up. Sergio. I crossed the room and I took his face in my hands and I made him look at me. His eyes were open and raw in a way I had never seen. You have been giving me warm and patient for 2 years, every morning coffee, every drive home in the rain, every time you sat on the kitchen floor with me without being asked, every time you fixed a thing without being thanked. Do you understand what I am telling you? You are not your father. You have never been your father. I know the difference. I have been the recipient of both kinds of love, and I know the difference, and you are not him. Something in him fractured, very quietly, like ice giving way in spring. I should have told you, he said. I should have said this weeks ago, instead of, yes, I said you should have. I'm sorry. It was the first time in 2 years that I had heard those 2 words from his mouth. They came out roughly, unpracticed, like a door that has been closed so long its hinges are stiff. But they came out. They were real. Okay, I said, and my eyes were full, and I could feel my chin doing the thing it does before I cry. Okay, that's a start. He pulled me into his chest. His arms came around me with a completeness, a total encompassing that felt like every apology he had never made running back through time and arriving at once. I pressed my face into the warmth of his shirt, and I felt him breathing, and underneath the breathing I felt something that had been held rigid in him for a month begin, very slowly, to release. "Don't go," he said again into my hair. I didn't go. We ordered food we didn't eat. It arrived and sat on the counter cooling while we stayed on the couch, and neither of us mentioned it for a long time. He sat with his arm around me, and I sat with my legs tucked under me and my head against his shoulder, and the apartment was quiet in the way it only gets late at night when the city outside has lowered its voice to a murmur. The lamp on the corner table made everything amber. His heartbeat was steady under my ear. "I need to tell you things," he said eventually. "You don't have to do it all at once," I said. "I think I do." A pause. "I think if I don't do it now, I will talk myself out of it." I lifted my head and looked at him. The lamplight caught the planes of his face, the strong jaw, the dark eyes, the careful architecture of him. He was looking at somewhere in the middle distance, composing himself, and I recognized the act not as coldness, but for what it truly was, a man summoning honesty from a place in himself where it had been kept locked for most of his life. "All right," I said. "I'm listening." He took a breath. "I am sorry," he said, "for the night you told me. I saw your face when you told me. You were trying to read mine, and mine gave you nothing. I know what that does. I have been on the receiving end of it my entire childhood, and I know exactly what it does to a person to extend something precious and be met with blankness. I did that to you, on what should have been the best night." He stopped. "That is unforgivable, but I am asking your forgiveness anyway." The words came out clean and specific, and utterly without the defensive hedging I had learned to expect from people who apologize but cannot fully commit to the act. There was no but after it, no qualifier, just the acknowledgement, direct and bare. "I forgive you for that one," I said quietly. He nodded, swallowed. "I am sorry for the 2 weeks after, for disappearing into myself, instead of coming to you. You told me what you needed. You told me multiple times, and I understood what you were saying, and I chose my own fear over your need. That is," he stopped, started again more carefully. "That is not what a partner does. That is not what you deserve. You have never once made me feel insufficient for being the way I am. You learned how I work, and you met me inside it, and I did not do the same for you. I withdrew when you needed me to come forward. I am sorry." The lamplight wavered. Somewhere outside, a siren passed and faded. I was very still against his side, listening with my whole body. "I am sorry," he continued, "for every morning you woke up in this apartment feeling alone. I want you to know that whatever was happening inside me during those weeks, the fear, the paralysis, whatever you want to call it, none of it was about you. None of it was because of anything you did or failed to do. You were extraordinary. You are always extraordinary, and I was too busy being afraid of my own history to tell you that, and you deserve to hear it every single day. Sergio, I'm not finished." I pressed my lips together and let him continue. "I am sorry for the night you were sick. I know you woke up. I know you were in the bathroom. I heard you get up, and his voice dropped very low. "I heard you, and I did not get up. I told myself you would come to me if you needed something. That was a lie I told myself, so that I did not have to move from behind the wall I had built. The truth is, I was afraid, and instead of recognizing the fear and moving through it the way a person should, I let you sit on the bathroom floor alone, in the middle of the night, while you are carrying our child. That is something I will not forgive myself for easily, and I understand if you cannot either." The room had a kind of held breath. I felt a tear move down my face without any preamble, and I didn't try to stop it. In barely more than a whisper, "I heard you crying, and I didn't come." "Stop," I said, and my voice was unsteady. "Sergio, stop for a second." He stopped. I shifted so I was facing him more fully, my hand on his chest, feeling the heart beneath it moving at a pace that told me exactly how much this was costing him. His eyes came to mine. They were dark and fully open, no glass in front of them, no managed distance, just him, just the interior of him, raw and present. "I need you to know," I said, "that I am not keeping score. I never was. I was hurt, and I needed you to understand that I was hurt. But I was never building a case against you. You are not on trial here. You are just—" I paused, finding the right words, which felt important. "You are just my husband, who got scared, who shut down in the way that scared people do, who is sitting here now, in the middle of the night, undoing every brick of that wall one by one. And that means everything, Sergio. That means more than you know. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he put his hand over mine, on his chest, covering it. There is more, he said. More? I have been doing this for most of my life, letting things sit unsaid, things that should have been said. He turned my hand over and looked at it, as though he was reading something in the lines of my palm. I am sorry for the folder of designs I dismissed without explanation in the first months we worked together. You were right about two of them. I knew it at the time. I did not say so. I made a small sound. He kept going. I am sorry for the dinner with your friends where I was somewhere else entirely for 3 hours and never explained why. Your friend Marcus tried 4 times to include me in the conversation, and I gave him one-word answers, and I could see from across the table that you were embarrassed, and you should not ever have to be embarrassed of me. I am sorry. Sergio, you don't have to. I am sorry for the argument about the holiday, when you wanted to go, and I said I needed to work, and that was partially true, but not completely true. The complete truth was that your family terrifies me slightly, because they are loud and warm and demonstrative in ways I have not had much practice with. And instead of saying that, I used work as an excuse, and let you go alone, and you came back a little quieter than you left, and I knew why, and I said nothing. I was fully crying now. Silently, steadily, the kind of crying that is not sad exactly, that is more like release, like something long held finally exhaled. I am sorry for all the times I let you feel like a secondary consideration when you are in truth. His voice caught on something, and he pushed through it with visible effort. When you are in truth, the primary thing, the central one, the one everything else organizes around. I have known that since the night I drove you home and you thanked me and got out of the car, and I watched you walk into your building. And I sat at the wheel for longer than I should have before I could drive away. I have known it that long and I have not said it nearly enough. The tears were running down my face freely. I made no attempt to stop them. He reached up and pressed them away with his thumb, one cheek and then the other. A gesture so tender, it seemed to come from a version of him that lived beneath everything I had ever seen. You deserve someone who says the things, he said. Someone who tells you, regularly and without being asked, that you are the reason the apartment feels like a home, and that I sleep better with you next to me, and that the idea of you sitting alone on a bathroom floor while I lay 5 meters away, not moving, is the thing I will regret most in a very long list of regrettable silences. That's a lot of apologies for a man who never apologizes, I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected, given the state of my face. The corner of his mouth moved. Even in the middle of all of it, I am aware, he said, that there is a certain irony in the timing. 2 years of nothing, and then the full inventory all at once. I prefer to be comprehensive. I laughed, an actual laugh, unplanned and wholly genuine, the kind that breaks out of you when your body is so full of feeling it needs another exit. He watched me laugh with that expression he kept mostly to himself, the one where everything in him was visible, open, entirely mine. Sergio, I said, when I could speak again, I need to tell you something. Yes, I am not afraid, about the baby, about whether you will be a good father. I put my hand on his face and felt the warm solidity of him, the realness of him, right there. I have watched you for 2 years. I know what kind of person you are. I know how you love. I know that it is quiet and particular and devoted and steady. And our child is going to know it too. Not because you will perform it, but because you cannot help it. It is who you are. I have never. He stopped. His voice had a roughness in it that was new. I have never had anyone say that to me before. I know, I said. I know. I want to be. I want to be good at this. The admission came out quietly, the way the most important things always did from him. I have wanted it since the moment you told me. Underneath the fear, I want to be someone our child can come to. Someone who is not. You are not him, I said again, for the second time that night, and I meant it down to my bones. You are his opposite, in every way that counts, and I will spend every day we have reminding you of that until you believe it. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were bright. I love you, he said. I should say it more. Yes, I agreed. You should, but you say it in other languages, and I have learned them all, so we have been managing. I will learn to say it in yours too. A pause. I will practice. You're doing fine, I told him. Right now, tonight, you're doing incredibly fine. He pulled me back against him then, both arms this time, fully surrounding. I went without resistance, and felt us breathe together. The same rhythm, in and out, steadying together, the way we always did eventually. The way we had been doing for 2 years, without quite naming it. Outside, the city moved through its late-night life. A car passed. Wind in the trees on the street below. Somewhere far off, music for a moment, then gone. I want to talk about names, I said into his shirt. A pause. Now? I've been thinking about it for 6 weeks and I've been doing it alone, and I think you should be involved. A longer pause, and then something changed in the quality of his quiet. It became the good kind, the fourth kind, the warm one. All right, he said, tell me what you've been thinking. We talked until the sky outside the window went from black to the particular deep blue that precedes dawn. The city made its slow transition from night to almost morning around us, and we paid it no attention at all. He did not run out of things to say. That was the part that surprised me most, because I had spent 2 years learning to translate his silences, had developed an expertise in reading what was not said, and I had sometimes privately wondered whether there was a ceiling to the verbal Sergio, a point at which he had expressed everything he had, and the sentences simply stopped. There was no ceiling. There was, it turned out, a very great deal of Sergio Lawrence beneath the composed surface, and once the door opened, it opened fully. He asked me how I had been feeling. Not in the perfunctory way of someone asking because it is expected. With his whole attention on my face and a quality of listening that made me feel like every answer mattered. Mostly good, I said. Tired. The mornings are difficult sometimes. I've been eating crackers in bed before I get up, which feels absurd, but it helps. I didn't know about the crackers, he said. You were asleep. I will get up with you, he said. Not as a question or an offer, but as a statement of fact, of intent. For the mornings, whatever you need. You don't have to. Kenny. He looked at me directly. I want to. Please let me want to. Something loosened in my chest. I had been holding more than I realized, had been braced against more disappointments than I had consciously acknowledged. And hearing that particular sentence, please let me want to, unnodded something I had not known was knotted. Okay, I said. He told me things I had not known. He told me that the drive home in the rain, the first one, had taken him 20 minutes longer than it should have, because he had taken the long route without realizing it, and only understood why when he got home, and found himself standing in his own kitchen, hoping he had not been too obvious. He told me that the morning he first left the coffee on the counter, he had stood outside my door for a full minute, trying to work out whether the act was too transparent, and had almost taken it back twice. You were nervous, I said, delighted. I was calculating, he said, which was his version of yes. About coffee. About you. The coffee was the vehicle. I tucked that away with all the other things I was keeping. My husband, standing in the hallway with 2 coffees, almost losing his nerve. The image felt like a gift. He told me that our wedding day had been the happiest day of his life up to that point, and that he had not said so at the time because he had been focused on not betraying emotion in front of the assembled guests, which he knew was absurd and which he regretted. The second happiest? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. The night you told me you were pregnant, he said carefully. Before the fear arrived, for about 10 seconds, before the fear arrived, it was the happiest I have ever been. Tell me about those 10 seconds, I said. He thought about it. He was not the kind of person who approximated something when he could be precise about it. And so he took the time to find the right words. It was everything becoming real, he said. Everything that had been theoretical becoming concrete. Not just the two of us, but a continuation, something we would build that would outlast us. And your face, he paused. Your face when you said it. You were trying to be calm, but you were lit from the inside. You have always done that when you are truly happy. You become luminous. I saw it, and for 10 seconds I felt only that. The 10 seconds were significant. I was crying again. Silently, neatly. I wasted them, he said. The fear came and I let it erase them. I should have let you see what was in me for those 10 seconds instead of closing before you could. You're showing me now, I said. Right now. This is what those 10 seconds looked like. He looked at me and I looked at him, and the 10 seconds happened belatedly, softly, in the amber lamplight of our living room at 4 a.m, with the city barely audible outside and a future beginning to take shape in the space between us. I am going to be present, he said, for all of it, the appointments, the preparations. I want to be there. I want to learn what is needed and provide it. I want to know what frightens you and be the answer to it when I can be. And when you can't be, then I want to be there anyway, alongside it. A pause. I have been practicing these past 2 years, with you, learning to be alongside instead of removed. Another pause. I am not finished practicing. No one ever is, I said. Some people are worse at it than others. Some people improve faster than they give themselves credit for. I looked up at him. You have improved enormously, Sergio. I need you to know that. The person you were when you walked past my files without a word is not the person sitting here. That person would not have been capable of tonight. You have done a tremendous amount of work to become who you are right now, and you should be allowed to know that. He absorbed this in the way he absorbed things that mattered. Quietly, completely, without rushing past it. You did some of it, he said. The work. You stayed. You kept reaching for me even when I was difficult to reach. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, he seemed to search for the word. That is the reason. The reason? The reason any of it was possible. If you had given up on me, and you had adequate reason, multiple times, I would have sealed over and continued as I was. He gestured, briefly, at the room, at us, at the whole improbable, imperfect, luminous thing we had made. So, the sky outside was definitely changing. A thin gray line was forming at the edge of the dark. Not light yet, almost. We should sleep, I said. Probably. He did not move. I did not move. In a minute, I said. Yes, he said. In a minute. We stayed where we were. The gray line grew very slowly at the edge of the sky. His hand was in my hair. Not moving, just resting there, warm and steady. My hand was over his heartbeat. The apartment breathed around us. Everything that had been held apart was resting, finally, in the same place. Sergio? Yes. You're going to be a wonderful father. The hand in my hair stilled. The heartbeat under my palm quickened. Very slightly. A long, long pause. I am going to try very hard, he said, and the roughness in his voice had returned. Every day, I am going to try very hard. I know, I said. When we finally went to bed, the light was coming. Not the first tentative gray, but the actual gold of it, early and clean and without apology, flooding the bedroom curtains with warmth. We lay in the familiar arrangement, his arm beneath my shoulders, my head on his chest, his heartbeat setting the pace. And the room filled up with morning light around us. I was almost asleep when he spoke one last time, his voice barely more than a murmur against my hair. I'm sorry it took me so long, he said. And I said drowsily, honestly, entirely, you got here. That's what matters. You got here. He held me tighter. Outside, the city was beginning to wake. Inside, the amber lamp was still on, forgotten, and the food on the counter had gone completely cold, and everything in the apartment felt like the first day of something. I slept. He stayed awake a while longer, I think. I felt the quality of his wakefulness and the stillness of him, not the rigid kind, not the distant kind, but the wakeful kind that is choosing to stay present, the kind that watches over. Later, he told me that he lay there for an hour with his hand on my stomach, very carefully, very lightly, and talked to what was there, quietly, in the way he did everything, introducing himself, promising things. He said he promised to get up in the middle of the night. He said he promised to learn how to say the things, all the things, in the spoken language instead of only the silent one. He said he promised that there would be a standard shown, not only held, and that it would be warm, and that it would be patient, and that it would make space for all the ways a person can be imperfect and still be loved completely. He said he talked for a long time. I believe him. I believe him because that is who he has been choosing, one day at a time, to become. Not the man he was made by, the man he is making. And making a self is harder and more ongoing than any other kind of labor. It has no final form, no finished state, no moment at which you can set down the tools and declare completion. It is the work of every single day. He chose it. He keeps choosing it. That morning, in the growing light, with his hand gentle on the beginning of our family, he chose it again. I know this. I know it because I woke later to find him gone from beside me, and panicked for a single sharp second in the way I had been panicked for weeks, and then heard him in the kitchen, heard the particular sounds of him moving quietly in there, not wanting to wake me. And a moment later, he appeared in the bedroom doorway with a glass of water and the crackers from the shelf where I had put them. And he was standing there in morning light with the most composed and private face, holding crackers and water at 7:30 in the morning, and underneath the composure, he was so genuinely glad to be there. To be doing this particular small thing for me that I could feel it across the room. You're awake, he said. You remembered the crackers, I said. You said they helped with the mornings. I did say that. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed and handed me the water and opened the crackers, and I sat up slowly and ate, and he sat there next to me in the morning light. And outside the birds were beginning, and the city was properly awake, and the day was an open thing ahead of us, full of ordinary hours to be filled with the daily business of choosing each other. How are you feeling? He asked. Better, I said, and then because it was true and because he had earned all of it, perfect actually. I feel completely perfect. He nodded once, looked at the window. The light was in his eyes, turning them from dark to something warmer. The composed face was in its resting state, but it was the version of it I knew, the version with the warmth running underneath, the version that was only ever fully visible to me, the version that said everything the words sometimes didn't. Good, said Sergio Lawrence. That's good. Outside, the morning continued in its unhurried way, making no particular fuss about anything, doing what it had always done, arriving faithfully, regardless of what the night had held, light where there had been dark, warmth where there had been cold. A small new silence between us, not the fearful kind, not the distant kind, but the one I had loved the longest, the fourth kind, the settled kind, the one that sounded like home. If you made it to the end, you're my kind of person. Leave a subscribe, comment down your favorite part of the story. And if you want early access to videos, exclusive content, or just want to support the channel, hit that join button right below the video. Even one member genuinely means the world to me. See you in the next one.